Hi, my name is Evan, and today we're going to talk about databases. I get lots of emails from new students asking me what are databases and how do they work. So, a database allows you to create, to read, update, and delete information. These database features sometimes are called CRUD. So, let's think about a database here and just do this. And so let's talk about creating. When we create a table, which is kind of like a container for information, think of it as an Excel file. Um, it looks something like this. Table has fields, and in this case, we're going to have the field first name and last name, and we're also going to have a field called ID, and this ID is a unique number. It's usually a number that's sequential. So, in other words, when you create additional pieces of data, you're able to search the piece of information through its ID. But in this case, we're going to use the example of an ID, first name and last name. And so we created this table here, and these are required fields. All of these are required fields. And we're going to call this table contacts. Okay? So this is the contacts table that has an ID, a first name, and a last name. So now that we created a table, think of it as kind of like a blueprint of what kind of data can go into this table. Um, to create a record for that table, it must be sent with these three fields: the ID, the first name, and the last name. And every time you insert a piece of data in here to the tables, uh, to the context table, it has to have, like I said, the ID, which in this case could be one. The first name will say John, and the last name is Doe. So when you send the information, it populates this table, and you'll have this information here, right? And if you send another piece of information, now you'll have two, and you'll have Jane Doe. And so what's cool about this is you could have an entire millions and millions of records that fit within these fields. And what's so great about this is when you want to read the information, you could actually read it by using something called SQL structured query language or structured query language. And it's called SQL, and it's used to read records in the database. There are many ways to write a query, but for today's example, we're going to use a simple one, and we're going to use a simple query called uh, written like this: select, and then like a an asterisk, which means all. Select all from contacts. So this is a simple query, and if you run this query on a table like this, you'll literally get like a list of all records in your table. Obviously, there's other more complex queries you can do, but for this example, we're going to keep it simple. There's things you could do. For example, you could actually search a particular record, and you could say, select all from contacts where ID is equal to, for example, number two, and then you will get this specific record. You could also aggregate things by dates, by letters, and all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, it's an endless panoply of options you could do when you could search a database. We could also update a database. For example, if you want to update this particular database, particular row here, we could do a query where we could do like, you know, update this record where the ID is equal to two, and update the first name field to like Mike. And so then you could swap these out, and then you'll have Mike here, and it would be updated. You could also delete a record specifically, and the way you do that is also use a query, and you say, delete record with the ID, whatever it happens to be, and then you could completely delete this record entirely. And that's it. It's a very simple overview about how the database works. You remember, just to recap, you could create a record, you can read a record, you could update a record, and you could delete a record. And when you create these records, before you do that, the first thing you have to do is actually create the table, which is the container of the data that's going to go in there. And you have to define the fields that are that your table are going to contain. In this example, it's ID, first name and last name. You could have tables where you could have bank records, you could have transactional information, you could really have anything. And in another video, we'll talk about things like relational databases and how these tables can have information that relate to other tables. That's it for today. Thank you, and if you like this video, like and subscribe. Bye.